Hey everyone, it's Dave here at Blue Bears Games. Today's video is going to be Blues Budget Brews. This is the second video in that part of the series. We're going to be going over a deck I just recently completed. It's Tatyova Bethnic Druid. It is centered around lands matter. It also has hand size matter just because Tatyova plays into both. So I'll read off Tatyova if you don't know who she is, and then we'll go from there. Let me go ahead and zoom out a little bit so that you guys can see it as I'm reading it. Alright, so Tatyova. She's 1 blue, 1 green, 3 generic. She's a 3/3 Merfolk Druid. So you could build her in a couple ways, but I'll go over that in a minute. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life and draw a card. So there are a couple ways you could build Tatyova. Lands matter is obviously the most important part of it, but it depends on what your secondary thing is. You could do something like Aether Flux Reservoir, where it's, you know, you're gaining so much life that you can pay the 50 to just do 50 damage to somebody. Landfall. There's a couple ways. Now remember, these are budget decks, so I'm trying to stay under the $40 range. Kind of hard with a lands matter deck because the most expensive part, or at least one of the most expensive parts in all of Magic, for especially Commander, is the lands. So we went a little cheap on the lands. So I'm going to go over everything in here and tell you what the synergies are and go from there. So that's Tatyova. It's a blue-green deck, so I put in here all to keep the cost monetarily down, I had to go with the cheapest dual lands that I could get. So we got a Guild Gate, the Simic one, we got Thornwood Falls, so at least you can gain some more life. Woodland Stream, they all tap for blue-green. I've got a Simic Growth Chamber in here, so the synergy here is that you return a land you control to its owner's hand, so you can replay a land, so for more landfall triggers. Evolving Wilds, because there are some turns where you're going to be able to get 2 land triggers in the same turn with that, so I did that with a Terramorphic Expanse. Temple of the False God, I've mentioned before in my non-budget decks, I don't like these because I don't have a Lands Matter deck. However, so I'm actually thinking of making a 2-lane deck where, for myself, where I will actually put a Temple of the False God because it taps that too, but it only does that when you have 5 or more lands, and in Land Matters decks, you're going to get to 5 quickly. Blighted Woodland, it adds a colorless, it taps out a colorless. Or you can pay a green and 3, tap it and sacrifice it, and go get 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. There's going to be a lot of land interactions in this deck. That's just one of them. Blighted Cataract I put in here for card draw because, again, I have a couple of things in here that matter what your hand size is. And then the rest is fleshed out with an even number, 1 extra forest. I think it's 16 forests and 15 islands, so that we can have... It's heavier in the land count because of all the stuff that's going to have lands coming into play. So I went a little heavier on the land itself than normal. So normally I'm in the 34 to 35 range. I believe there are 40 basic lands, or not really basic, 40 lands in general in this deck, just so that all the land triggers can happen and we have enough to do so. The next section we're going to go over is the land interaction stuff. So normally this is where I pull the ramp out, and most of that's usually in the non-green section, but because we're green it's fine. But in the non-green section, it's usually like, what do they call it, mana rocks and stuff like that. But because we're in green, and because that's what it does, I decide that we're going to go non-mana rock on the entire deck just because it doesn't need it. So it's a Russian version of Rampant Growth, which just says go get a basic land, put it in play tapped. It's 2 to cast. Untamed Wilds, same thing. I'm not sure. I can't remember if Rampant Growth. If Rampant Growth is forest or basic land, but either way, you go get it and put it in the play tapped. Untamed Wilds, search your library for a basic land and put that card in the play tapped, and shuffle your library afterwards. I believe they're the same card. I can't remember off the top of my head just because I've done nothing but searching for specifically the best budget versions of these kind of cards that I can do. Some of these aren't as budgeted as the other ones, and that's only because I had multiple copies of them, so I decided to sacrifice the monetary problem for the fact that I had enough to do it. Grow from the Ashes is 1 green, 2 generic with a kicker of 2. And you can search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, and it's not tapped. and then shuffle your library. And if it was kicked, instead get 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield, so it's to bring more lands into play. Far Wanderings is the same thing. Search your library for a basic land card and put it into play. This one comes into play tapped, but if you have Threshold, which means that you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, instead you search your library for 3 basic lands and put them into play tapped. So I tried to get as much in there as possible. Cultivate, which was just reprinted in M21. This is the Commander 19 version. Is 1 green, 2 generic. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal them. Put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Beneath the Sands is 3 as well. It's search your library for a basic land. Put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. However, I have this in here. It's overcosted. It costs more than 2, and I didn't want to be that if it wasn't getting more than 1 land. However, I put it in here for the cycling. I had my girlfriend test the Elf deck the other day, and in the testing, I saw that the Beneath the Sands was cyclable at an opportunity where it was convenient, and she cycled it, and it turned into a top deck of a card. She needed to draw 8 cards from when she had nothing. She drew the Beneath the Sands, cycled it, turned it into a Return of the Wild Speaker, and was able to draw 8 cards off of it. So it's in here for the cycling ability and for the land grab, depending on what part of the game you're in. You could need that land to come into play, and at that point, you know, that 3 mana may end up being 20 damage. You just never know. The next one is Journey of Discovery. Again, 3 to cast. It's choose 1 or entwine it. So you can either search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Or you may play up to 2 additional lands, and if you entwine it, you can actually go get 2 lands and put them onto the battlefield. So, again, I was trying to get as many non-1 land grabbers at, you know, above 2 to cast. Spring to Mind is next. So this one is 3 as well to go search for a basic land card and put on the battlefield tapped. But the Mind part, because your hand matters now, is to draw 2 cards. Now it's expensive, but it's a dual use card, so I had to, you know, I'm trying little cheeky stuff in here. Seek the Horizons is 4. You go search your library for 3 basic land cards, reveal them, put them in your hand, and then shuffle your library. While I wanted the most of the stuff to put stuff into play, there are some cases where I wanted them to go into your hand, so your hand size was bigger. Circuitous Route, 4 to cast. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and/or gate cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. There's only 1 gate in here, so when you use this, if you haven't gotten your gate, you're obviously going to go grab that and then a basic land. Explosive Vegetation for 4. It searches your library for up to 2 basic lands and put them into play tapped and then shuffle your library. The next thing, so that was the sorcery versions, and now we're going to go into like other things that help you grab lands or put lands into play somehow, some way. So the first thing is in equipment, it's Explorer Scope. It's 1 to cast and 1 to equip, so it's pretty cheap. And whenever the equipped creature attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it into the battlefield tapped. Gaia's Touch. Now, some of the cards in here are not mint condition for the fact that monetarily they're expensive, but if they're not mint condition, then it decreases the value, meaning I can put them in here for their usability. Gaia's Touch is one of the more important cards in this deck. So it's a 2 to cast enchantment from the dark. It says you may put 1 additional land into play each turn, but it must be a forest, a basic forest, and then you can sacrifice it to add 2 green to your mana pool. You're using this to get the extra land drops because things like Azusa or anything else that says you can play an additional land are, you know, Azusa before the reprint was probably like a $30 card. Now she's like a $7, but that still throws the monetary number of $40 or less or $50 or less off by a lot. So since it's not a mint condition card, I can put it in there because it's only worth like 2 or 3, but it throws the numbers off when you have, you know, 100 cards is hard to keep under a certain price point. So since this was more on the heavily played side, I could put it in here. So it's an additional land drop. Growth Spiral is 1 blue, 1 green. Draw a card, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Urban Evolution is 1 green, 1 blue, 3 of any. Draw 3 cards, and you may play an additional land this turn. Coiling Oracle, blue and a green for a 1/1 Snake Elf Druid. When it comes into play, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it into play. Otherwise, draw it. Alright, this is a Burnished Heart. It's the Russian version. I had a couple extra Russian cards that I had to get rid of. It's 3 to cast for a 2/2. It's its ability reads, and you can't read it here unless you can read Russian. For 3, you can pay 3, sacrifice it, search your library for up to 2 basic lands, and I believe put them into play tapped is what it does. Pilgrim's Eye is a 3 to cast 1/1 flyer. It's a Thopter. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Wild Field Scarecrow is also 3 to cast for a 1/4 defender. So it's got a nice butt on it so it can block some things. For 2, you can sacrifice it and search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. You know, I have to remember if Burnished Heart says put them into play. I believe it does. Alright, Arboreal Grazer, 1 to cast 0/3 with reach. And when it enters the battlefield, you may put a card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Sky Shroud Ranger, 1 to cast 1/1 elf. You can tap it and put a land from your hand into play, but you can only do this as a sorcery. And then you have the better version. Oh, I'm sorry. That's up next. Fertilid is next. It's 3 to cast for a 0/0. Comes into play with 2+1/+1 counters, and then you can pay 2 and remove a counter to have target player search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. The better version of the other one is Land of War Scout. It's 2 for a 1/3 that you can tap it to put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So for 1 more mana, you get a 1/3, and you can do it as an instant. So it's a little bit better, but I wanted it as much redundancy as I could. Sylvan Ranger is 2 to cast 1/1 elf. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand. Gate Creeper Vine, it's a 2 to cast 0/2 defender, so it's a wall. And when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a basic land or a gate and put it into your hand. Silhana Wayfinder is a 2 to cast 2/1. It's another elf. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal either a creature or a land from among them and put it on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Elvish Rejuvenator, 3 to cast for a 1/1. It's an elf as well, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library. Yavimaya Elder, it's, as far as green goes, this is probably the one that gets you the most cards in your hand from way back in the day. This is from Urza's, not Legacy, not sorry, Destiny. Urza's Destiny. It's 2 green and 1 for a 2/1. When it is put into a graveyard from play, you may search your library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal them, put them in your hand, and then shuffle your library. And you can pay 2 and sacrifice them to draw a card. So he actually ends up being 3 cards in your hand. So, and 2 of them are lands, and 1 of them is whatever. And it could be another land. Wild Wanderer is a 4 to cast 3/2, another elf. Obviously, elves are the choice when you're looking to get land into play. It's a 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, search your library. You don't have to, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Risen Reef is a recent addition from last year, M20. It's one of the better cards probably in the deck. It's a 3 to cast 1/1, and when it or another elemental, and I couldn't find any other elementals that fit too much. You know what? Just real quick, I don't think there's a whole lot in here when I was looking up stuff. Alright, so Fertilid is an elemental, so that'll, go a little ways for it. But not a lot of them were elementals, and not a lot of them do this. Maybe the more recent ones do, but I didn't see them when I was looking. So anyway, what Risen Reef does is when it or another elemental enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it is a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't put the card onto the battlefield, put it in your hand. So it's kind of like the other one, the elf version of it, where you can put a land into play or put a draw card. Not really draw, though. It gets around draw effects, like if you have something that, like, on the opposite side of the board is a Narset, Parter, or Veils. It's not a draw. It's a look and put it into your hand so you can get around it. And the newest addition from Ikoria was Parcel Beast. It's 1 blue, 1 green, 2 generic for a 2/4 elemental. So there you go. More synergy with the Risen Reef. Like I said, I didn't find a whole lot of them, but what I did find I put in. It has Mutate of a blue-green. It's a 2/4. And you can pay 1 and tap it. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. And if you don't put the land on the battlefield, put it into your hand. So there are 3 versions of basically the Risen Reef, Parcel Beast, and then one of the elves in here, which probably should have been an elemental. But, you know. So there's some synergy there. So it's all about putting lands into play or putting cards into your hand. So that's that section. So all that with the Tatyova out equals a lot of card draw. Alright, so the next section will be basically drawing cards or putting lands into play, what matters with them. So it's going to be mixed in here. I didn't separate out which one's which, so I'm going to go over all of them at the same time. So the first thing up is Vine Lasher Kudzu is a 2-cast 1/1. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. There's going to be a couple of things like that. Timber Maul Larva Cares 2. It's a 4-cast 2/2 beast, and whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each forest you control. So it can get pretty big pretty quick. Marassa Ranger is a landfall card. It's 4-cast for a 3/3, and then it has landfall with whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay a green and 3 generic, and if you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so you can make it grow. And it's kind of an expensive ability because it's 4 to cast, and then it's also 4 to use the ability. However, in a lands matter deck where you're trying to put as much land into play, you're going to have the mana. This is Morrow. It's a 4-cast, star. It's power and toughness. It's an elemental too, by the way. So there's more synergy with Risen Reef. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. So Tatyova, like I said earlier, she lets you draw a lot of cards. There's some stuff in here that helps you put cards into your hand. So I do have a way to make it so your hand doesn't have to go down, but, you know, again, this is budget version, so I had to go within the confines of the monetary restrictions. Embodiment of Insight is a 5-cast 4/4, another elemental. It has Vigilance, and it says land creatures you control have Vigilance. That's a very small part of this deck where you may be attacking with your lands. To do an upgrade on this deck, you'd probably do something like one of the Nisses that makes all your lands indestructible, 5/5s or whatever. What it is, I think they're 3/3s, 4/4s, or 5/5s. I can't remember. Monetarily, it didn't fit into the budget, but again, these decks are made to be upgradable. They're not optimized in any way. They're just a general idea with some cards that work. So just keep that in mind as you're watching this. I keep forgetting to mention that. Anyway, it has landfall that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may, and you don't have to, have target land you control become a 3/3 elemental with haste, and it's still a land. Spore Mound. It's 2 green, 3 generic for a 3/3 fungus. Whenever it doesn't say landfall, basically this is a landfall ability. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 green sapperling creature token onto the battlefield. So you can clog up the board with chump blockers, or you can overrun in for the win. Rampaging Balos is 2 green, 4 generic for a 6/6 beast. It has trample, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So these two go together well. So if you're putting 3 lands into play, you can put 3 1/1s and 3 4/4s. So synergy here. Alright. Oran Reef Hydra, again, 2 green, 4 generic for a 5/5. It's a Hydra. It has trample and landfall with whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Oran Reef Hydra. But if that land was a forest, you can put 2 on it instead. So it can grow with the amount of lands coming into play. Baloth Wood Crusher, it's kind of the same as Oran Reef. It's 2 green, 4 generic for a 4/4 beast with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +4/+4 and trample until end of turn. So just imagine on, turn 3, this guy's out, and can you do it on turn? Maybe turn 4, and you've got 2 lands coming into play. So it's a 12/12. It's not bad, and it has trample. So Beanstalk Giant, 1 green, 6 generic. It has an adventure. The adventure is 1 green, 2 of any, and you can search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. And then you can cast it as the creature, and it is a giant that has power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. Molimo, the Morrow Sorcerer from Invasion, is 3 green, 4 generic. I believe it's a legendary tree folk now. It's been errated, given a subtype, an actual tribe. It's a star trampler. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. So it can get pretty big pretty fast in this deck. Moloku, the Clouded Mirror, is 1 blue, 4 generic for a 2/4 Moonfolk Wizard. Has flying, and you can pay 1 to return a land you control to its owner's hand, and you create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying. Synergy there is for the landfalls, so you can return a land and play a land, so you can get both the 1/1 and a landfall trigger. Aeon Chronicler is 2 blue, 3 generic for a star creature. It's an avatar. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. It has Suspend X, and the Suspend is 1 blue, 3 generic, and then X. X is not allowed to be 0, and whenever a time counter is removed from Aeon Chronicler while it's exiled, draw a card. So it can make itself bigger, and you can draw off of it. It can be basically a spell. If you have enough land out there, it can basically be the spell part where you don't really care about the creature, but you're drawing cards. Uyo, the Silent Prophet, is 2 blue, 4 generic for a 4/4 another Moonfolk Wizard. It itself also has flying, and you can pay 2 and return 2 lands you control to their owner's hands to copy target instant or sorcery spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. The synergy there is something like a Rampant Growth, where you can pay 1 green, 1 of any for a Rampant Growth, right? Get a land into play, and then you can return, in response, you can also pay 2, return 2 lands to your hand, and copy it, and go get another one. So that's where that's the reason for that one being in there. Soromoro, First to Dream. If you can't tell, it's a little bit, it's not a mint card. It's like that for a reason, because the monetary cost, it brings it down so that I can put something like this in there. It's 2 blue, 4 generic for a legendary spirit, star with flying. Its power and toughness are also equal to the number of cards in your hand, and you can pay 4, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and draw a card. So you can get, you return a land and you draw a card, so it grows by 2 power, 2 toughness every time you do that. The next up is Scourge of Fleets. I don't normally do Krakens and Leviathans and Octopus, but this deck actually does it. The first one is Scourge of Fleets. It's 2 blue, 5 generic for a 6/6 Kraken. When it enters the battlefield, return each creature your opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. I have 15 islands in here, so you should be able to return pretty much anything to their owner's hands and cast this, You should be able to cast it, number 1. And number 2, you should be able to get most of your opponent's creatures back to their hand so you can attack with all your other stuff. Lure Scale Scodel is from M21. It was just released and it had to go in here. It's 1 green, 1 blue, 1 generic for a 2/2 snake. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So you can see that the creatures here are synergizing with each other. So you're literally sitting there and you're pretty much going through and putting lands into play, drawing cards to make your creatures bigger, and you're going from there. Your hope is to end it with the Scourge of Fleets with a couple of things. I haven't gotten to the other part of this yet. This is the part that I'm most excited about. So it's budget, so I couldn't put in here like a Reliquary Tower, so I had to go with a generic spellbook. So it's a 0 to cast artifact. It makes it so you have no maximum hand size. I also couldn't monetarily put in the, I believe it's a whale from, I can't remember what it is. But when it comes to play, you don't have a maximum hand size. It's, I think, a whale or a kraken or something like that. And it's from Rivals of Ixalan. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, though. It's a legendary creature. Monetarily, I couldn't do it, so I had to put a spellbook in instead. Mask of Avacyn, it's an equipment. I put it in every budget deck because it's the only budget version of an equipment that gives protection to your commander in the form of either Hexproof or Shroud. So quick creature gets +1/+2 and Hexproof and equips for 3. Dark Blade Reforged, it's a 2 to cast equipment, legendary artifact. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control. To equip a legendary creature, it's 3, or equip a non-legendary creature, it's 7. You're going to probably put this on Tatyova to make her bigger. Get commander damage in if you need to. She's going to make her, it's going to make her pretty big. I don't have a lot of defense in here because I wanted to go with the idea of the deck without, kind of interacting with my opponent. I just wanted to get the idea, see if it worked. So I only have 2. Scour from Existence is the first one. It's 7. It's an instant and it's colorless, so it's not like it's going to be red elemental blasted or anything like that. Exile target permanent. Back to Nature is 2 to cast instant for green that just says destroy all enchantments. One of the I don't know if it's really the kill card, but one of the things that I was hoping that would be used as a kill is Sylvan Awakening. It's 1 green, 2 generic for a sorcery. Until end of turn, all lands you control become 2/2 elemental creatures with reach, indestructible, and haste, and they're still lands. The synergy here is my hope is that you have the green creature, and I'll pull it out because I can't remember its name off the top of my head. My hope is that you have Embodiment of Insight Out, so your land creatures also have Vigilance, so that you can tap them for mana if you need to as well. So that's what I'm hoping, is that you have both of those out. You've got the creatures, they're turned into 2/2s with Indestructible, Haste, and Vigilance, and you can swing in for the win. Treasure Hunt, this was a little... I added this late into it. I wanted to see if this would work. It's a 2 to cast sorcery. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card and put all the cards revealed into your hand. My hope is that you have land clumped when you play it, where there's 2 or 3 lands, so you can actually draw 4 or so cards from this card. That was the point of that. And the other thing, one of the other conditions I was hoping that you could win with, besides the Scourge of Fleets, was Ominous Seas. I want this to work so bad, and I'm hoping that it does. It looks like it can. It's a 2 to cast enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, and remember, your Tatyova will help you draw a card just by playing lands, and you have other things in here that let you draw a card. It does not work with when it says to put a card into your hand, so just remember that. You put a Foreshadow counter on it. Remove 8 of those counters to put an 8/8 Kraken token into play. Or if you know it's not going to work, you can cycle it away. So my hope is that you can get this out. You're drawing cards while playing lands with Tatyova. And then the point of it is that you draw into... You're putting counters on it. You're making 8/8s. And the point is that you draw enough cards to get to a Scourge of Fleets to be able to play it for the win, because you won't, you'll have all those 8/8s. There is a card out there that says return all Krakens and octopuses and stuff like that. I don't have it, so I couldn't put it in here. And I don't know if monetarily it would fit anyway. So that's an upgrade option for you. If you want to, if you purchase this deck, if you want to take a look at it, that's an upgrade option for you. Up next is Tragic Lesson. This was synergy. I needed more card draw with less downfall. This actually turns into a benefit. It says draw 2 cards and discard a card unless you return a land you control to its owner's hand. For more landfall triggers, I wanted to see if that would work as well. Oh, look, I did have it. I thought it was a different card. Never mind. Alright, so I did have the card I was just talking about. So Slyn Voda, the Rising Deep, is a 2 blue, 6 generic, 8/8 with a kicker. The kicker is 1 blue and 1 of any, so it ends up being a total of 10. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return to all creatures to the owner's hands except for Merfolk, Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. So the synergy there is if you've got enough land in play and you can kick him while you have drawn all those cards, put all those counters onto this guy right here, onto Ominous Seas. The point is that you can possibly get a win out of nowhere by returning everything that your opponents control. Same thing with the Scourge of Fleets, so that you've got... Your board is still there. Your opponent's board is not. You're hitting with 8/8s. So that's the point of that. I thought there was another one. The other one I'm thinking of is the one that makes it so you have no maximum hand size. Alright, and the last thing was more utility than anything. Excuse me. It was a... it's Trigon Predator. 1 green, 1 blue, 1 generic for 2/3 flyer. So I wanted a little bit more flying in the deck just in case you ran across somebody like... My girlfriend plays Angels, and it's a big pain in the butt when you can't block Angels and you get commander damaged out by Aurelia. So, it's a 2/3 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. It's a little bit of flying, it's a little bit of, defense, it's a little bit of everything. So that's the last card in the deck. So that was what I put together as a, it's sub $40 for a Tatyova Lands Matter deck, where I was able to, when you look at the, I had the list on MTG Goldfish. I put all of them there. The problem I have is they count the basic lands for a lot higher of a price than I was expecting. I don't care about the lands. I know that they're white border and they're in demand right now. I know they're revised lands. I don't really care. I have so many of them that I don't add that into the price. So when you look at the price on the website, it's not that. These are my $40 decks. I don't care about the basic lands, so I don't count them. But that was my version of a sub $40 Tatyova Lands Matter, Hand Matters deck, and I hope you guys, you take a look at it and see all the synergies. You like what you see. So yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions or concerns about the deck or about anything in general about how I do my videos, do me a favor and go ahead to the Facebook page. It's Blue Bears Games on Facebook. Send me a message if you have any questions. If you want to possibly purchase this deck, this specifically is for sale. I only make one of each deck. I don't think I can actually make more than one copy of each deck, so this will be solely your own. It'll be one of a kind. I do charge 40 plus shipping for it. Send me a message and we'll get something together. So that's questions, comments, concerns. Go to the Facebook page. Put them in the comment section below if you need to. It doesn't matter to me. And we'll go from there. Please do me as a favor. Go ahead and share this out to anybody who you think might like this kind of a deck. Might want to try to build a deck. Maybe copy it if they want to go out and get their cards on their own. Or have some of them themselves. It's up to you guys. But share it out to people that may like it. Or even in general, just share it out. I would appreciate that. Give the video a like. I like to see likes more than I like to see dislikes. Obviously, it's just like anybody else. If you were thinking of giving a dislike, please send me a message as to why. I try my best to make these as entertaining and as informative as possible. These are basically just owner's manuals for the decks that I make. This is what I do. It's what I like to do. So, instead of giving it a dislike, tell me why. And that's just about it. I don't have anything else for you. This will come out on Friday. It's only Wednesday today. It's coming out on Friday. I have oral surgery on Thursday. I may not have a video out by next week just because I might not be able to talk or I might be in pain. So hopefully I will, though. I have something in the background that is from previously that I recorded before I had to go get the surgery, so maybe that'll happen. But either way, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching. If you have anything you need to talk about, just contact me. Thanks and have a good one.